Patrick Moore, ex-founder of Greenpeace International, why did you leave this organization? What was the reasons?
When we began, we had green and peace, and the peace meant to save civilization from nuclear war. And the green, of course, means environment. As we moved through time, the green was kept and the peace was lost. And so finally, by 15 years later, I'm still a director of Greenpeace International, and I find my fellow directors are saying that humans are the enemies of nature. Humans are the enemies of the earth.
Okay. But you also say that Greenpeace is on a very bad direction. I mean, they are scaring people. They don't talk the truth. They only want to have members or paying contributors.
Yes, first I'd say that Greenpeace was eventually sort of hijacked by the political left. When the left sees power, they try to take it. And they took Greenpeace. Then they use sensation, misinformation, and fear to get money from people. It turned into just a fundraising organization. And they say about some kinds of organizations, they begin with very good intentions to save the planet or save the people, and then they become a business because now you have a payroll and you have to make money, and then maybe sometimes you just become a racket. You turn into like a mafia. And this is what's happened with Greenpeace today.
An ecology again.
Exactly.
And do they have still ecology in their mind, or is this only something that they present to the people in order to get the money?
I believe ecology is only a word to them. They use it all the time, of course, but I don't think they understand it very well. I found myself, this was many years ago now, more than 30, when I had to leave. After being there in the top for 15 years as a scientist, when I left, I was the only director with science education. Every other one of the directors was either political activist, social activist on the left, or entrepreneur, because now you could make a living in the environmental movement. At the beginning, first 5 years, we were all volunteers. We made no money. We lived like peasants because of it, because it was our life. We wanted to do something about this problem of the environment back then. The rivers were poisoned, the air was poisoned, they were killing 30,000 whales every year, setting off atomic bombs and all of these things. And so that's what we started against, these things. But in a way, once you have solved those problems, the more difficult ones, then what are you going to be against? And now they just make things up.
They make things up.
They make up against GM foods, they make up against nuclear power, they make up against fossil fuels, they make up against pretty well everything.
So are they lying?
Yes.
They are lying?
Yes.
And they are lying to the people by inventing false apocalypse scenarios.
Yes, this is the misinformation, or even more purposefully, disinformation, on purpose giving bad information to
the people.
Yes.
Compare Greenpeace to an aggressive religion like Scientology?
Correct.
That makes people dependent and creates special scenarios to fear people, to scare people?
Yes, fear is now the main motivating factor, along with guilt. It works like this: you're driving down the Autobahn with your children in your SUV, and you think, oh my God, I'm killing my grandchildren here by doing this with the exhaust from my car, and then that makes them afraid, and then that makes them feel guilty for what they're doing. So fear and guilt combined is a very powerful motivator to open your wallet and give money to people who say, we can help you with this problem.
What I read, I think 1 year ago, was that the polar bears were in danger, and they have very dramatic photos, images of dying polar bears. But the truth is, for example, the Norwegian Polar Bear Organization says they haven't been in a better state than now. I mean, this is also something that they work with to make people fear, make people scared.
Yes, and no one can go up in the Arctic and count the polar bears by themselves, you know. So every year this group of people who call themselves polar bear scientists, who are getting big government grants in the US especially, they go up to the Arctic and they look around, and I don't know what they study. They come back, they say, oh my goodness, it's even worse this year than last. We need more money to go again next year. We must go back.
But as a matter of fact, also in Canada, what I read is that the polar bears are enjoying a very good life, even better than before.
Of course they are. All around the Arctic, there are maybe 5 times as many polar bears today than there were in 1970. The main reason for this is that in 1973, a treaty was signed with all the Arctic countries, Russia, Norway, Canada, etc. They all signed a treaty to stop unrestricted hunting of polar bears. Before then, there was no control on hunting polar bears, so they had been reduced to a smaller number, 6,000 they said. Today there are at least 30,000 polar bears, so they have increased greatly, and yet they are still saying, oh yes, they've increased, but they could be endangered in the future, so you have to give us more money to go and study them again next year. They just keep saying this every year, serial grants for life until they retire, these guys. But there are some honest polar bear scientists like Susan Crockford, who is lives on the same island as me, Vancouver Island, a big island, and she has studied these bears all her life too, and she is telling the truth about them. Same with the walruses. The walrus, there's very healthy populations of walrus, and they say, oh, they're not getting enough ice. They need more ice. No, walruses don't need more ice. They need a place where they can go down in the shallow water and dig for clams with their tusks. So they don't want ice, really.
Okay.
Because the Arctic has ice, they sit on it.
But I want to come back to the point of the beginning
Yes.
that we were referring about. You said that Greenpeace has nothing to do with science, or had from a certain point on nothing to do with science anymore. It's only a political organization.
Yes, and the problem there, I think, was when we took on the toxic issue. In 1975, the rivers of Europe were mostly poisoned and dead by factories putting their waste in there. And we were responsible with a riverboat called the Beluga for bringing this to the public's attention. But the problem is, like with whales, you don't need to be a marine biologist to have a good reason to save the whales. You don't even need to be a nuclear physicist to be against nuclear weapons. It's obvious. But if you're going to deal with toxic chemicals, you need some science, because there are some toxic chemicals which are beneficial, and chlorine is the one that comes to mind, and that was actually one of the reasons I had to leave Greenpeace. Is my fellow directors, none of whom had any science education, decided we should ban chlorine worldwide. Well, chlorine is the most important element for public health and for medicine. Adding it to drinking water is the biggest advance in the history of public health, saved more people from disease than anything else we've ever done.
Yeah, so they were against it. But how would you describe the situation at Greenpeace now? Are there...
Oh, they have left science behind so many years ago.
So many years
All
ago.
they are is propaganda now.
Do you have the impression that Greenpeace and all the other NGOs become more and more aggressive in order to fear people?
I would say more hysterical now,
Hysterical.
because I think they are losing. I think they are losing the minds of intelligent people.
You sure?
I hope so, because they should be, because they're lying and it's basically a big hoax. But the Greens, they don't even recognize that wood is the most important renewable resource in the world, both for building and for energy. Because still 2 billion people use wood as their main source of heat for cooking and heating their homes in parts of the world. And of course, wood is used for construction.
Of course.
What else is, what other building material is renewable besides wood?
Okay.
Really none.
Last sentence. What would you describe Greenpeace now? How would you describe this organization?
A parasite on the society. That's how I describe them, a parasite on our society.
Patrick Moore, thank you very much for your statements.
Thank you, Michael.